Good evening, Terry. How are you? Can you hear me? Hi, Terry. How are you this evening? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, Terry. How are you? Are you able to hear us?
Hockey that's in the same boat, right?
Good evening. The person that was just talking, it's under Planning Department.
Not sure how I'm planning department.
Good afternoon, or good afternoon. It's good evening, Counselor Antosky. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. We are going to be starting in a couple of moments, if you just want to hang on.
Yeah, I saw the agenda earlier and I was just looking for it again. Who did it come from? Who was that? Alexandra?
Alexandra is the planner on file.
Okay, I'll try and find it again. I can't find it again, but I'll look again.
If you want, I can just resend it to you.
Yeah, do you mind flipping it over again? And I believe that Counselor Carpenter will open this evening.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Alexandra. Of course, I just found it as you were sending it, but thank you.
Good evening, Terry. Can you hear us this evening? Are you able to hear us, Terry? I think he's having some technical difficulties. Good evening, everyone. We will be starting shortly. There's two people that their names are indicating planning department. I wondered if they could change their name, identify who they are. That's on the call.
Hello, Mark Vilmer here from SRM Architects. I think I'm one of those plan department people by accident.
You are, Mark. Thank you for letting me know and welcome. Do you know how to change your name?
I think I just figured it out.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you.
No problem.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Carpenter, will you be hosting the first part of the meeting, or would
Yes,
you like me to?
yes, I'll do the opening and Councillor Antosky will close.
Thank you so much.
And we have, what, 2 minutes, right? And we have 17 on screen, myself and Cheryl. How many from planning? Alexandra, just yourself?
Myself, as well as Joe, Muto, Darlene,
I see.
Reza, as well as Sarah Haig. She's one of the new planners. She will be taking our notes tonight.
Okay, that was the name I wasn't sure about.
She's one of the new development planners. So
And Joe, you had somebody else, he said something.
Joe Muto,
Yeah, and
Darlene.
Darlene, and Reza.
oh, okay.
If it helps, I can bring this slide up, Councillor Carpenter.
That'll be helpful for me to start off with. Well, great.
Alexandra, we're now live on YouTube. It's 1 minute too, so you can start whenever you're ready. If you
Okay.
have everybody on the line.
Welcome to this public meeting for zoning application. This is the proponents meeting as part of the planning process. Councillor Antosky and I are here to facilitate the meeting with our planning staff. And our job is to listen to what the public's concerns are on the issues and to take that back as part of our consideration when a decision is rendered when this comes forward to planning at the committee of the whole. Now, I will open the meeting and Councillor Antosky will close the meeting. And I know she'll remind you that if you have any other thoughts, how to forward them to us. For planning staff, we have Joe Moodle as our manager of development planning. Alexander Mathers is a planning planner on this file, and Sarah Haig, who's a planner. The agent is Mark Villamere for the architects for the agent, and Cameron Stone, Steve Essel, and Mark Binakers are the owners of the property, the ones making the application. So Alexander, with having said that, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. And again, my name is Alexandra Mathers, and I am a planner with the City of Brantford. We are here tonight because we've received a zoning bylaw amendment application for 247 and 253 West Street. This meeting is being streamed online through the YouTube platform and will be available for viewing afterward. If you're viewing and have any comments, please follow up with me after, and I can do the best I can to have those questions answered and your comments included. So this, as Councillor Carpenter provided, this is only the first meeting of this proposal to elicit the public feedback for the applicant to take into consideration. The next meeting will be the statutory public meeting required by the Planning Act presented to the Committee of the Whole. Members of the public will have an opportunity to speak for or against the proposal at that meeting as well. So just to go over a quick agenda, tonight, Councillor Carpenter provided the introductions. I will go over the planning overview, as well as the applicant will provide a presentation on their proposal, and then there will be time to provide any comments or questions that the public may have. So the applicant is proposing to construct an 8-story apartment building with a total of 70 units. So in regards to the planning process, this is a zoning bylaw amendment application, and this is required by the Planning Act. To go back a bit, the official plan is a framework of goals and objectives that the city has that provides the land use designations and policies which guide future development in the city. The zoning bylaw puts the official plan into effect. It states how lands may be used, where buildings and other structures can be located, the types of buildings that are permitted, and how they may be used. It also regulates lot sizes, dimensions, and parking requirements, building heights, and setbacks from the street. The subject lands are currently designated under the official plan as Strategic Growth Area Intensification Corridor. The official plan permits the use that is being proposed. And this is an image of the proposed site plan. And the property is currently zoned residential conversion zone. The apartment building, as proposed, is not a permitted use, hence the reasoning for the requirement of the zoning bylaw amendment application. So now I'll pass things over to Mark, who will present the presentation and proposal for the applicant.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. I believe, I don't know, I'm sure if Cameron, if you're on, if you want to do a quick introduction for yourself.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
So hi, everyone. I'm Cameron Stone from CSM Developments. Steve Asel, Mark Binakers are my partners. They're watching the meeting and we're taking in all of your questions and feedback tonight. We're from the community. We all live in Brantford and Brant. This is our home, just like yours. We've owned several properties in the city of Brantford over the last 12 years. We want to continue to build this community. We believe in this community, and we feel there is a need for purpose-built apartments in the city of Brantford. We've hired a tremendous team of architects, engineers, and consultants to work on this project. They're the experts, and any questions they will answer either today or in writing following the meeting. With that being said, I just want everyone who is present to know, and who's watching on YouTube right now, after the consultants are gone, the engineers, the architects, they've moved on to other projects, we'll still be here. We plan to build a building we are proud of, where people want to live and call their home. I'm going to defer to one of our consultants, Mark, who's on camera right now from SRM. He will be handling our presentation. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Cameron. So good evening. Thank you for attending our virtual public meeting. Of course, we're here to present the proposed development for Cameron, Steve, and Mark at CSM. My name is Mark Vilmer. I'm a managing partner at SRM Architects. Next slide, please. So just a little plug here. All right. So the project team presented. So CSM Developments, you just saw Mark, and so Cameron with Mark and Steve. They're a wonderful team of people, young guys that really are passionate about development, and they're not looking to design and have built condominiums that they just build and sell and just keep flipping. They're really interested in committing a sustainable design here that will last for a long time. And so when they came to our team, to SRM, they effectively said, we want to build attainable rental apartments for people in the community to be able to live in. And they found this lovely piece of land that fit within the official plan for intensification on a transportation corridor. So I would like to just walk you through the concept, and to the best of my ability, answer any questions that you may have. I will preface this with, if there's questions that are extremely technical and engineering in nature that I'm not comfortable answering, we will take down your questions. We will go back to our consulting team and provide fulsome written responses to everybody. However, in advance of this meeting, I did receive questions, and I've had an opportunity to reach out to our engineering team, whether on the transportation side, the hydrogeological side, or geotechnical side, as well as civil. And we did get some of that feedback. So I'll do my best to convey that as accurately as possible, but we will follow up formally with written response to everybody's questions, because my number one goal right now is to be able to, as adequately or as accurately as possible, convey this is what we're trying to design for this site, and take in as many questions as possible so that we can make sure that everybody understands exactly what we're trying to do here. Next slide, please. So this is just an existing conditions map. You've already seen it, so I won't dwell on too much. There's 2 existing buildings on this property, and fundamentally, to facilitate the development of this site, these 2 homes would be demolished. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on the left in the on your image here, 253 West, and on the right, 247. So the site is situated along West Street, northwest of the intersection of West Street and Burnley Avenue in Brantford. So the combined site is roughly 0.325 hectares. The site is limited in the way of existing vegetation. Contains few trees, which are identified on our preservation plans. The key thing to take away from the site is there's a tremendous elevation difference from the street to the rear yard. This is approximately, it's like a 2-to-1 slope. And so we're going to be using this grade differential to assist with an efficient parking layout. And I say the word efficient purposefully because we are trying to design this building as cost effectively as possible, so that we can, in turn, have a wonderful development that's affordable to the public to be able to rent, not $1 million units. These are very comfortable units that we feel will meet the market demands in the community. Next slide, please. So to the immediate north, the site's existing 1.5-story residential home with a garage that rests close to a shared property line. Continuing down North Street, west are a number of other residential single family homes, 1 to 2 stories. Next slide, please. So our proposed building. So CSM, they came and they said, what's permitted, what can we build here, and what's effective? And so we've come up with a 8-story multi-unit residential building. The proposed development consists of 70 rental units and 68 parking spaces. The parking spaces consist of surface parking as well as underground parking, access using what you could call a ramp, but it's effectively just following the surface, the gradual slope that gets you to the rear of the site. We also have under building parking proposed, which would effectively be at level 1, partially accessed from the streets. We're currently total 68 parking spaces, 8 of those 68 being visitor parking spaces. I saw one question, just a little bit of confusion over the total number of parking spaces. We identified 3 parking spaces being accessible parking. That's not in addition to the 68, so it's 68 total parking. There's vehicle access to development from West Street, large outdoor amenity area, and then we and some internal amenity spaces that are also proposed, including workout rooms, gyms, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this very accurately shows you can see how you'd enter from West Street, currently proposed. You can access surface level parking if you go directly into the development. And then we, of course, have a driveway that's sloping down to get to the rear of the development, which gives you your underground parking. This underground is technically a basement, and it will be mostly underground except for exposed at the rear of the site. But then the building truly has a fully subterranean level, which is used for storage and amenity. Just the typical building service spaces that you would need in the development. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this here is your surface. This is level 1. So you enter directly off the street. There's parking in the building. There's also a common lobby, an amenity area, some vestibules. You have access to stairs, and you, of course, have the elevator to get up to the first residential level, which would be on level 2. Next slide, please. This level looks very similar, and that's because that's the actual underground parking that follows the same structural system. And this would be accessed from the rear of the site when you drive around the building, and now you are in the effectively the basement. Because the site does slope, we have opportunities for doors at grade and some windows at certain points, and we're working with our civil engineers to work out the grading to try and maximize the efficiency of the sites to maintain a very cost-effective building that we can then use whatever additional resources to beautify the development. Next slide, please. This is the basement, so I was just referring to. So some amenity, some office, back of house spaces, as well as some storage opportunity in the truly below grade level. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a typical residential level. So this could be level 2 through 8. And you can see here just general nice common living spaces in the suites. And you have any number between 3 and 1 bedroom units. Every bedroom is on an outside wall. What do we have here? I do have a range of units that was not specified, so I did a little bit of just confirming here. So we're anywhere between 515 and 890 square feet. Of course, an 890 square foot suite would be on the corners where we have more natural lights so that we can ensure that every bedroom is on a exterior wall plus a common living space. By virtue of the structural system we're exploring to develop this building, we are presented with a unique opportunity to have full balconies on every single unit for the entire width of the suites. And so this is to provide an additional outdoor amenity space that would be considered to be private for each suite. Then, of course, at grade, you have the more common outdoor amenity spaces. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just more of a context map showing the relationship between the proposed developments, the unique property lines and boundaries that we're working with. And so we're operating as a rectangular building. I'm not sure what the shape is of the site, but we've been able to try and maximize the outdoor space for landscaping and outdoor amenity. And while we're trying to keep the building with a presence towards West Street, that it looks like as though there's going to be a road widening, and so we'll be working out how we can address that as part of our future resubmissions. Next slide, please. So from an urban design perspective, the development is pretty straightforward. It is a basic rectangle as a built form. We're trying to keep everything as simple as and practical as possible so that we can have a high degree of comfort on the actual function of the suites. And so right now, having a building that's effectively a rectangle, then we're effectively tasked with the wonderful opportunity to create with materials on this building how we can create a sense of intrigue and fenestration. So as you can see here, the access to the site, we have one point of vehicle access to the site. We are on a transit stop, and so that further helps reinforce the parking strategy on this development, where we are not looking to provide 2 parking spaces or 2.5 parking spaces per suite. Next slide, please. So really what it comes down to here is the development being the total precast building is what's currently contemplated. We have the opportunity to perform liners to create interesting patterns and colors on different facades. Beyond that, we're looking to do glass railings on all the balconies and using window wall systems for glazing for spandrel bypass and nice large windows, whether it's in a living room or in a bedroom. Next slide, please. So we provide as part of the submission, it's just a simplified version, but actual detailed building elevations to help articulate and explain which portions of the building are going to be glazing and vision, which portions of the building will be a solid wall. Wherever we have solid wall in this development, on the lower levels, we're looking to do some very nice glazing treatments so that it looks like a window wall or a curtain wall. So it looks, we can effectively activate frontages with internal programming. But then beyond that, when you get up on the levels where you have just a solid wall that would act as a structural member for the building, it's not just going to be a painted concrete wall. Because we're looking to do precast, it gives us the opportunity to put in very special patterns, whether it's masonry patterns or swirl patterns, along with some very nice glazing. And so it gives us a lot of latitude in terms of how we can effectively decorate the building moving up so that we can break up a big built form and create several nice forms to have a nice balanced composition. We've done a sun study on the development, and there's a lot more detail in the submitted material, but effectively what we're effectively showing is at the spring equinox and the fall equinox, we're looking at the sunrise, midday, and sunset. And we've explored what's happening with the shadows. Because the development is it's relatively narrow in terms of the geometry, we found that the shadows pass through neighbors' properties rather quickly. And so that was an important piece here, where when we do cast a shadow, there absolutely would be shadows cast on neighboring immediate developments and houses and backyards. However, the shadow wouldn't reside there very long. It would move through fairly quickly. And the diagrams that we proposed or presented help illustrate that fact. Next slide, please. So again, here's the same exercise with the summer solstice. It's interesting when we put these diagrams together using certain terms of reference. We know during the summertime, you have a very high sun. So you actually, generally speaking, have relatively low shadows. One thing we did in these diagrams, we're not only showing the shadows cast by the proposed development, but the aggregate increase by the developments. And so what we mean by that is if you see the diagram on the far right, June 21st at 7:34 p.m., pretty late in the day, and you can see the length of the shadows. You see the adjacent houses, even single detached family residences, will cast a decent shadow at such a late point in the day. And so we ensure that we're showing that as a way to compare, relatively an 8-story building versus a 2-story building, how much longer would a shadow be? And then, of course, the last slide here is the winter solstice. As you can see, the shadows are fairly long depending on the day. And of course, we're using the City of Brantford terms of reference as kind of set times, so that when you compare a development against another development, everybody's using the same the shadow and impact. So I certainly don't want to bore people by going in with the actual methodology of everything, but what we feel is helpful with these diagrams, people can visually see the impact of the shadows cast, and we're not shying away from the fact that we do know the development cast shadows, and we're based on our analysis and where the shadows move, it will cast a shadow in a certain sphere or radius of residence, but then it moves out of there beyond a certain point. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation for what we're trying to build here and what we're proposing. But we're very happy to take questions, and I will do my best to answer everything right now, and things I'm not comfortable answering because I don't have the technical background on it. I assure you that we do have a team of engineers and planners that can provide additional feedback.
Okay, Alexandra, we also have a number of people that have sent in emails that they've sent them to either Cheryl or I or copied you, and you have those. Mark, did you get all those emails, Mark?
Yes, Alexandra provided me with information, and so we've been going over that, and I'm prepared to answer some of the questions right now. I think there's a general gist of some of the nature of the questions. I believe some of the questions were repeats, different people having the same concerns, the same questions, and so I'm prepared to provide some of the answers. But I do acknowledge that it will not be fulsome. I will not be able to respond to everybody's questions in this forum, but we will certainly be happy to have additional questions asked. We're writing down everything, and we'll get back to everybody when we have a consultation with the rest of our engineering team.
And Mark, when you do respond to those individuals, either on today's meeting or those that have sent in emails, would you make sure you copy Councillor Antosky and myself and planning staff?
Absolutely, yes. Alexandra, I'll be going through Alexandra with everything to ensure that we have proper dissemination to absolutely everybody. And there might be some people who are asking questions, and there might be some others who haven't asked that particular question, but when they hear the question, they'd be very interested in the answer. So we'll be sure to make sure it's got proper circulation.
Okay, thank you. And Alexandra, who do we have first on our list?
Councillor Carpenter, we have 5 attendees that have joined the meeting this evening, and our first attendee is Mr. Martin Sitko. Mr. Sitko, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, Martin, go ahead.
Well, okay. I assume everyone got my email. Okay, so I don't know if I need to get into all that here for the public, or
I can, Martin. I know why your hesitation, because it's quite lengthy and quite technical. I would be very comfortable, though. We've reached out to our geotechnical engineers as well as our hydrogeological engineers with your very good detailed questions. I can give you a summary of our answers. If you wouldn't mind maybe summarizing the general question, I think that'd be helpful for everybody here.
okay. Oh, for me to do a general summary?
Just a general summary of your main areas of concern, because I'm prepared to answer a few of the points, but I think to give you a fulsome response to all of your questions, it will certainly be in written format.
Okay, let me just check what I've got here. Okay, it mainly revolved around concern for the potential of the building, because it's 8 stories, to compromise through excavation processes.
That's right.
The idea of the excavating below the water table, and then because you're running into potentially fine soil, quote, quickness, in other words, like the quicksand effect. So the concern is for stability of the structure and stability of, well, my neighboring foundation. And then going along with that, the water effects, that because you're below the ground, or because it would be necessary to undertake a below groundwater table excavation. So, I already got. Okay, so a quicksand effect to lose integrity to support loads. Okay, that's the short version.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Martin. I think that's pretty good, actually. And of course, our response will be paired with your question as well, so everybody have an opportunity to see the nature of your questions and the response. What I can do is I'll do my best to summarize. Again, I'm certainly not going to pretend I'm an engineer, but I did consult with our engineering firm, CVD. So they consist of geotechnical engineers, Eric Chun being one of the principals there. And there's also another gentleman that I was dealing with, Sandy Anderson, and he's and he's not the engineer, he's the scientist, he's the geologist, if you will, for the hydrogy question. So one of the concerns that you're talking about is during the excavation of the site for underground. And if we're doing excavation in the water table, there's the concern about the quicksand. And this is actually referenced in the geotechnical report. And so the report, let me just see here, what it talked about was during excavation, there would actually be temporary dewatering done. So while you're doing the temporary dewatering, the groundwater would be drained before the excavation occurs. And so this will effectively prevent any quick condition of the footings being affected, say, on adjacent lots as, like yours, your home. So it would not be affected because of the proper procedure of excavation done at the time of temporary dewatering. Then, of course, what happens is, I want to emphasize, it is only a temporary dewatering because it's not going to be, the water table will be allowed to recover back to its normal level after construction has been done. And we're going to have effectively a bathtub design of the developments where there's no need to do dewatering. There'll be some additional safety valves done as part of our development to prevent leaks, but there won't be any net results and cause to your development. Before there's any excavation, when they're shoring, there's a series of, through the site plan approval process, there's going to be shoring permits required, and these are engineered along with the shoring. There will be temporary dewatering applied for and engineering done to show just how that works. And of course, as construction starts, things come up that weren't anticipated, but this is quite typical, and we have engineers that be doing regular field reviews and be on consultation to be able to advise during that process, with the explicit concern of not wanting to affect any neighboring properties, such as your own. So we very much understood the nature of your questions and your concerns, but there's procedures and engineers that would be all over that to ensure that there be no undermining any settlement or any cracking of any adjacent property and structures.
And can I ask more questions?
Yes, certainly you can, Martin. Go ahead.
Okay. Next, or kind of related to that, is the idea of potentially air pockets from, I'm saying potentially, methane gas or effects from methane gas from Burnley Park, because it was a garbage dump, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We've been working with the engineering department at the city of Brantford just on that note, and our engineers, there's a variety of factors. They don't have any concerns on that front, and I can provide that detailed information justifying the lack of concerns because of the nature, the age of the dump, the nature of the dump. It wasn't a conventional dump where there was garbage. It's actually, a lot of these areas exist all around, and I understand people consider them, they can categorize all these areas as dumps, but they're actually, the nature of what's actually been there, whether it's organic or not organic, would also contribute to that. Plus, they had some rather empirical evidence indicating that there doesn't appear to be anything after having done on-site testing and verification. But I'd be happy to provide a more fulsome response to that question, because this is, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. It's our engineers have been able to satisfy us and the city on those conditions.
Okay, and I'm not sure, I attached photos to my email, but I don't want to start with that here because I'll probably end up cutting off my signal. But basically, the question would have to do with, there's an apartment building, or I had photos of 2 apartment buildings, one next to Metro, I think it's on St. George Street, and then one on the corner of St. George Street next to North Park Street. So they contrasted the idea of the neighboring property. The one was an older house, and then I guess as they built I'm assuming it's the shoring wall, like I'm assuming it's the concreted wall that was put in while they excavated, and then when they're finished the building, they left the wall, which became the retaining wall, like for the neighboring property. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but so my question would be, is there a similar thing here for that wall that's on my driveway?
Yeah,
Because
you're
that's
referring to a retaining wall on your property, Martin?
Yes.
Yes. So at this point, we proposed grading and some retaining walls within our site, how to handle things. But I can tell you at this point, we have not done the engineering on the shoring for the development. So we'll certainly would have more information at a later date. Typically, my experience, when we do shoring, it tends to be completely buried and doesn't come out of the ground. So any work that be done below grade, whether it's temporary shoring that ultimately becomes part of the finished product, whether we're using pre-stressed tiebacks or temporary rakers that are eventually removed, those engineering questions and solutions have not been resolved or even approached at this point. But certainly they would be through the site plan approval process.
Okay, and then just one other question, and it's not a, I don't know, I don't want to make it sound bad. I'm just asking the procedural question. Okay, when an application like this is approved, you know, what the engineering report says, it's all, they're kind of painting a picture that assuming, like, it has assumptions that everything will be done you know, good and right and everything. Okay, so on that basis, then the city engineer would potentially approve the application because you're assuming that everything's going to be done in accordance with the plan. Then from the engineer's approval goes to council, then council would approve it because you know, everybody's assuming that's going to be ideal. Now, after it's all, or wait, there's one more step. Okay, so now once the applicant, and I'm not accusing anyone that, you know, that this would happen, but suppose that it's possible that because you want to be cost effective, so suppose you hire you know, somebody to do the foundation or concrete or whatever, and somebody somewhere cuts out some cost or some, you know, which we don't know because it ends up buried. Okay, so when that's all finished, and then if someone has a damage or something, a neighbor has some damage, the engineering report that was submitted, it's at the end, it has a table of waivers and, you know, waivers of liabilities based on assumptions. And then so what I'm trying to say is that the final person that'll have some damage now trying to recoup for all these, you know, the city engineer department, the city council, the applicant, subcontractors, to go through the whole thing and to try to prove, you know, I don't know what the standard of proof would be in a, so is there any, you know, because at that point it's up to, say if it was me, it would be up to me. Like I would have to pay the legal bills, the lawyer fees, so I guess my question is that the process? Like, is that the correct?
Right. Well, I think I can take a little step back. So as part of this process, where we're talking about official plan and a site-specific zoning bylaw amendments. And so a lot of this and a lot of these engineering reports and feasibility studies, they're done effectively to give the confidence that a development can happen here within following proper engineering guidelines. You know, these are professional engineers that take their jobs very seriously, as do the planners, as does our office, as architects. And so these studies, for example, the geotech report, the final foundation applications, the shoring permits, all of these actually are reviewed and contemplated as part of the approvals that we're seeking in terms of a zoning relief. However, this isn't the process where they get evaluated and critiqued for approval. So even if we were to get this approval right now, let's pretend it was a council and we got approval, which that's not the case. All of these studies reports and engineering reports are still going to be scrutinized through the site plan approval process and as well as the building permit process. So there's multiple levels of review by many different people to ensure that a system proposed, a solution proposed by professional engineers who have, they're serious about what they're doing, by highly qualified city staff reviewing and engineers at the city going, yep, that made sense to us. Then the next part you're talking about is if people want to cut corners. Well, what's nice about development applications through site plan approval, the client would ultimately enter into a site plan agreement with the city. And as part of that, there's going to be a letter of credit and levies, all sorts of fees that the client would pay. And a lot of these fees are effectively, it's like a guarantee that say, okay, once you prove that the work has been done properly, you get your deposits back. And so there's a lot of checks and balances through this process, but that's all the steps afterwards. So I did want to answer that question, but in this forum, at this stage, a lot of this documentation is done so that staff and, to be frank, the clients, our clients, have the confidence that, yep, if we get the approvals on the site, we go through all these studies and all this work, that we have the confidence that when we go to the next stages, we've given thought to how we can resolve some of these challenges on site.
It's in its infancy.
Okay, and I just want to note that related to that is that, I don't know the address, but I think it was on North Park Street. There was I think it was like a 7-story building that was a few years ago was sinking.
I think, Martin, you're referring to a building on North Park Street that had a cracked elevator shaft.
Okay, and it was sinking. Was it actually sinking?
Not that I'm aware of. I think they had to restructure the elevator shaft.
Okay, well, that's the one I was thinking. Okay, my next question is there enough parking for, because what I was reading was that there was not enough parking even with the parking garage? According to city regulations.
Sure, and Martin, yeah, we got several questions about the parking. I've also reached out to our transportation engineers, this is GHD, with a series of questions. Some of these may have been yours and some of them may have been some other folks. But I suppose, in essence, is there enough parking? And so GHD prepared a traffic impact and parking study. And if you bear with me here, I'm going to pull up my response matrix I prepared here so I can give you their answers on this. Okay, so thank you for the delay there. So the development proposes 68 parking spaces. 60 of it are dedicated to the residents. 8 are for visitor, and that's this we know does not meet the existing city bylaw. However, based on the vehicle ownership, parking surveys, and demands, the parking demands and the occupied residence yields 0.85 parking spaces per unit or less. So that's kind of like a nice metric for this type of proposed development and what tends to be the market-driven forces for a number of people who have a residential suite renting one of these units and what the take-up on parking is. So our proposed development is 0.857. So we're just above that. And so from our transportation engineers with TDM measures, they believe that we have sufficient parking that will meet the parking demands. Similarly, based on the parking demands and parking surveys, visitor parking requirements of the occupied visitor spaces generally tend to be about 0.11 per or less per apartment. And of course, in our development right now, we're 0.114 visitors. So from a transportation consultant research based off of the average take up and what we propose, they believe we're right on the mark of where we need to be. This also becomes a bit of a market-driven question, where our Steve and Mark and Cameron, they would not want to build a development that's underserved from a parking perspective, because they won't be able to actually market this development. And so it's sort of a two-pronged approach. One, what's the market want? Because if we provide, say, an additional level of underground parking, our office, we're easily able to design another level of underground parking, but it gets quite expensive to build. And there's no need to provide that high ratio of parking when the take-up won't exist. And again, that's runs contrary to the vision of development to be able to be attainable for people in the neighborhood. We don't want to have 70, or 70 would be all of them, 60 of the 70 residential occupants, in single tenants, effectively subsidizing as part of their monthly rents to pay for additional expensive infrastructure that would yield it a higher parking ratio. So that's why we try to hit the mark on, we only want to build the number of parking stalls that we believe we'll actually need. And so again, we looked at our transportation consultants on their recommendations of what would be an average yield and an average demand, as well as working through the CMHC guidelines with our clients on where they think, if they have X number of units, what the proper ratio would be. So at the end of the day, being above 0.85 was the correct mark for this development.
Okay, and do you know yet the fence that would be along my property? What kind of fencing or the height? Do you know that yet?
The landscape design, I believe, has provided the current proposed concept. There are zoning bylaws that dictate the performance and the height of a fence, but I suppose I'll speak in a generality through the site plan approval process, which is where these details get narrowed down, but with input from the community and neighbors, just like you, Martin, saying, this is what's important to me, this is what we would like. That goes in the minutes, that goes in the comments. And then that literally goes on the paper in terms of, okay, here's what the residents are looking for. Here's what would make them comfortable. And it's sometimes it's not only a fence, it's fencing and landscaping and shrubs, boxwoods or coniferous planting where you get year-round privacy. And those are all things that, excuse me, we're very open and comfortable to provide.
Okay. I think that about does it for now, because I can't think.
Yep, we can come back to you, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, and all your remarks are being recorded. Alexander, who do we have next? I see some hands up. Do you want me to pick
Hi,
them?
Councillor Carpenter. That's okay. It's Darlene. We have Mr. Larry Pollock next.
Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Let me.
Hey, how's it going? I just want to check and make sure you can actually hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you fine, Larry. Go ahead.
All right. My questions are about parking as well and traffic. Now, I know I read through the report and the study on the parking, and I didn't realize that the building was supposed to be geared to income housing, which would have a lower parking space need. At least that's what it said in parts of the proposal that I was reading through. Correct me if I'm wrong on what type of housing it is.
Yeah, I should. It's certainly it's not geared to income housing. It's technically speaking, it's not. I have to be careful. It's not affordable housing. It does not meet the threshold set by the city of Brantford to be qualified as affordable housing. Nor is that the intent for the development. This is following CMHC guidelines for what is considered to be affordable, which it's a relative term, of course. But this is, I don't know if I can say it this way. It's a regular apartment building where it's not looking for transient, high turnover. This is people coming in that want a lovely place to live, and they can stay there for several years to make their home. The development does happen to be on a transportation corridor, which does in itself provide opportunities for additional public transit, which we could effectively reduce the parking. But I thought I'd just clarify that it's not it's not a rent-controlled facility.
Okay, that is not what was in the project, the description that I read, but okay, I'll move forward on traffic measures. Part of the traffic measures, it goes back to the TDM information, which still says that Dundas Street is a cycling priority street. However, it's far too narrow and far too busy with far too much on-street parking, even be considered that a bike route or anything like that. There are better places than that, like Burnley and St. George Street, but whatever, there is some level of ability to cycle there, but I don't really believe that that's going to be in the near future. You're going to see a lot of that happen. Brantford's really not typically cycling friendly right now, and the idea of people walking and right now taking transit, and even within the next 2 years, I don't believe that transit's going to be really that enthusiastically accepted. So I'm not sure about your level of parking spaces, given that information. The other issue that I see in the traffic study, which I found a glaring error, is it ignored Grandview Street completely and its multi-level apartment building, which is nearly across the street from the project that's proposed. So I'm wondering how the traffic and can be justified without actually having that information in the study. I would say that study needs to be redone. Like I live on Clarence Street, traffic here backs up every day at 4:30 to 5:30, and it backs up every morning from like 9 to or 8 to 10. It's quite bad in the rush hour time. So I'm not sure how the reliability of those traffic studies. Also, the 2012 traffic study showed looks as though Clarence Street dead ends at West Street, which it does. The 2015 traffic study looks as if West Street dead ends at Clarence because someone messed up the diagram. So I would say that entire traffic study is discounted to almost useless unless it's corrected. You know, having no knowledge when they did hook up the BSAR, which I don't know if you even know what I mean by that, to the end of Clarence Street, we weren't really clued in as residents about that occurrence. And so now we've got major northeast, southwest traffic daily. And so having an extra 70 commuters on the road at that time of the morning and afternoon is really not a pretty, you know, or it's just not something desirable for us. So I don't really know how we can move forward with that without redoing traffic studies again. So that's my comments on the whole thing. Now, I don't know if you really read through that entire traffic study, but I read through it and there's some holes.
Well, I'll certainly, with your feedback and as well city staff feedback, we'll be revisiting all the studies reports first and foremost to address any inaccuracies and, of course, to be able to address any additional questions. I think some of there may be some chicken and egg scenarios here, where as part of the development, any site plan approvals, this site, for instance, there's a 7-meter road widening required, and that's likely to be in line with the new official plan. The new official plan may call for additional lanes to alleviate traffic concerns, as well as additional sidewalks and bike paths. I'm just speculating on that front, but that historically is part of the rationale for road windings. A 7-meter land conveyance along the frontage of this particular site is a huge amount, because that would effectively imply it's likely 7 meters across the street or there and abouts. And so land conveyance and road windings take a long time because they're effectively only done at the time of development applications. And so that, as a long-term strategy, would certainly help address traffic impacts. But the nature of the TDM measures, as well as the TIS that's been provided as part of this application, is not looking at the future upgrades as part of their long-term view, even though that may be the case. It's like you said, what's the impact today? What would be the impacts in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years if this development were to go ahead? And so we'll take that back to the team and make sure that we have fulsome answers on all those questions.
Okay, you're talking about road widening. I don't think that's geologically possible on West Street. There's a huge cliff on the other side of the road from where that building's going to be. So road widening is never going to happen there. Not without your development being gone. So I don't see that being an answer to it. So I would say that West Street right now is completely limited to its forever width. I just don't see any means to facilitate that new growth if in that way. Like it's a pretty tight landlocked piece of property that's been purchased, and heavily trafficked streets all around. I just don't see how attractive it's going to be, first off, to anyone who's moving there, unless they're really, under the gun. But for the residents who've been here all along, it's just not painting a pretty picture for us to see another 70 cars running around our neighborhood, popping in and out of places. Oh, and I forgot, on the transportation study, of course, they don't review things like businesses, but there is a very busy Tim Hortons at the corner of Dundas and West, which adds to the pain at rush hour by being backed up out onto the street quite often on both Dundas Street and West Street. So, all I can see is, and there was one other issue on the parking, by the idea of not charging, not including the parking in the rent, which was also supposedly an affordable housing issue. That will force a lot of residents who do have vehicles to park on the street. So now we have parking issues on the street, on Clarence Street, Burnley Ave, the Elgin Street, Campbell, Cowan, and Alice, which are already difficult, will be even worse because we're going to have potentially, 60 cars extra trying to park there. And when they can't, well, they're going to have to park in one of the private parking lots, like one of the businesses on Clarence Street, who will then have the difficult task of having to move those vehicles at their own cost. So I still don't buy into the lack of parking. At any rate, those are my comments. I know that you've got, I read all the engineering studies for the traffic and that, but that parking issue I still believe is not realistic. And I would think that it would be, the city should encourage the developer to not charge extra for their tenants to park, that it should be part of their rental.
Thank you for your questions, Larry. Any more, or you can always come?
No, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, our next attendee is Jenny Hill. Jenny, can you hear us?
Okay, Jenny, your mute's still on, Jenny. Just turn your mute off. There you go. You're good to go, Jenny.
Hi, thank you for your time. I heard this gentleman, Mark Villamere, mention something about how his building would impact the residents. I'm just wondering why the person who wants to develop this land in the first place isn't keeping that in mind and setting with a low density proposal in the first place and limiting himself to only a 2 or 3 story building.
The best answer, so thank you for your question, Jenny. No, I completely understand the nature of your question. I really do. We've been retained to effectively design a higher density multi-unit residential building, principally, I believe, because the ownership group at CSM, so Cam, Mark, and Steve, they've looked at the official plan, and the official plan effectively identified a series of areas for intensification. And so when they decided to look to put a multi-unit residential building, they've referred to the official plans to, oh, look, along West Street over here, if we satisfy the following conditions, we should be able to get development of this size. That's the best answer I can give you in terms of why they would like to do development in this location at this scale, because they do want to follow, they do want to do a development within the official plan and what it permits, and so that would be the best answer I can give you at this point.
Okay, and I also want to point out that you spoke about landscaping and the plants that are on that property, but you failed to say outright that you were chopping down the 4 black walnut trees that are mature at the the southern end of the property, which are then going to become parking spots in your plan. So I'd like to know how you're going to justify chopping those trees down, considering the current, planetary things that we all see happening in this world today.
Yeah, no, that's it's certainly not a great position for me to be in. Say I want to cut trees down and put parking spaces, but the fundamental reality of trying to find spaces for parking, logistically, those were the best places for them on site. And of course,
I don't really see that as an issue if there was a building scale to actually represent the density that you're proposing. I think is too big. So I could see maybe happily some families moving into nice townhouse there, something, that we all aspire to hope for, becoming actual homeowners in Canada. And kind of
sure, no,
I understand
absolutely,
that
yeah.
might not be where you guys are at, but I just like to know why you think that this building of this size, how is that supposed to relate to the buildings that are surrounding it?
Yeah, I think I think our planner on our team would be certainly best suited to answer the question. Even if it's an unsatisfactory answer, I apologize. I'll do my best. The parameters for us were they want to follow new intensification along the transportation corridor to meet what's permitted under the official plan, and the official plan has been updated to effectively create intensification. And so I suppose in the long run, along West Street, most of the single family detached homes in a long time eventually will get intensified. And this is part of that intensification corridor, which is why this proposed development is there. What makes it challenging, of course, and I understand, is because it's one of the first ones. There's not a whole lot of adjacent developments in this new area that's already signed under the official plan for intensification.
Because they're building up on West Street further. Yeah. 2 proposals.
Okay, that's all I have to say, but thank you for your time. For now,
Thank you.
that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Next, we have Wendy Hill. Would you like to ask any of your questions or concerns? I think she's muted. Wendy, can you hear us?
Okay, so we've talked an awful lot about the car transportation, but in your report that you had, you were talking a lot about pedestrian traffic, because there is the one bus stop on Terrace Hill. The other one is over by the Yes Church on West Street. It's actually quite a ways from the area where you're doing, especially in the winter time. In the summertime, there's no problem, but in the winter time, because of us not having a boulevard, when the plow comes along, the sidewalk is covered. And it doesn't matter how diligent the house owners are trying to get that muck off their sidewalk, sometimes it's impossible. What happens is we have pedestrians walking in the roadway. Now, according to your study that you had done, based on geared to income apartments, you were planning on a lot of people using the public transportation system. That means there's going to a lot of people going to be walking on the roadway in the wintertime, which is not safe. They're going to be with their children or without their children, depending on the situation of the families that are going in these apartment buildings. I would hate to see anyone get hit. so far, no one has got struck by a car during the winter time when it is so dangerous walking. The other problem we had is on the opposite side of West Street, we have a lot of water that is flowing from that hill all the time, constantly, from 258 to Grand Valley or Grandview Street, and to the corner that goes opposite the Shoppers Drug Mart. There's always water flowing. If there's water flowing on top, there's water flowing underneath. So we do have a problem with water in this area. Is it safe to build a building that size on ground that's that unstable?
Okay, sorry. So I was just pulling up my notes here. So thank you for your question. Specifically about the water flow, it is a challenging area because of the just the gravity of the nature of water flowing through the site. In consultation with our civil engineers, they said prior to the area being urbanized, a creek originally ran through Greenwood Park until about 1932, when a storm sewer was installed and along the bed of the creek to allow it to be filled and resemble the park we see today. So Greenwood Park continues to be a major overflow route for properties upstream, which includes 247, 253 Street West. And so the proposed stormwater management design for the development continues to maintain not only the existing drainage path, but also reduces the post-development peak flow rates leaving the site less than pre-development rates. And so this is accomplished through on-site quality control proposed as part of the development. Stormwater management designs proposed development to mitigate, to increase the increased flooding risks around the properties. I'm just trying to pull up some notes. What we're doing is, it's not great from a stormwater perspective, but as part of the infrastructure upgrades done on site and quality management, and using flow control on roofs to capture additional rainwater to slow the rates for infiltration. The engineering of this site post development will make the area safer and better performing than what it is pre-development. But I should say to meet the criteria set by the municipality of Brantford and the engineering standards. So it will follow in line. But our engineers want to point out that it will overall perform better from a safety perspective and overflow perspective when it's done, the development, versus what it is today.
Well, according to the reports that you did, you were hooking into what's already there. You weren't putting anything else new in.
Yeah, I think it's about slowing the flow, like as you say, like tying into stormwater. It actually slows the infiltration further, so that it actually reduces the rate, not the total quantity. You're absolutely correct in terms of the total volume that would be going through in terms of rainwater in this case, but it slows the rate by capturing and holding it on the site longer before it lets it, sort of like a French drain, I suppose, as an analogy. But beyond that, in terms of technical, I'd be happy to follow up with our engineers and provide a written response. I don't want to allude that I understand it any further than that.
Well, the storm sewage we have right beside our house is always flowing. That's coming from the other side of the street. How are you going to fix that problem, which will compound the problem on the site where you're depending to build?
Right. I can't specifically answer how we'll address the issues across the street, but I can confidently say that our engineers are confident that this system the net result, the net impact will be a net positive for the community because of what they're going to be able to do within the site. A lot of this has to do with expensive infrastructure upgrades that are effectively made possible by the new development. But in terms of technically understanding what's being done and how it's going to help, I'm certain our engineers can provide a much more fulsome response to your question, because I certainly don't want you to take my word for it. we'll provide a written response from our engineers that should articulate exactly what's going to happen as part of this proposed development.
Okay, but the other problem we have is the house, like the apartments that you're going to be building, 70 of them, are double the amount of population that's here now. So what you're going to do is in a very short amount of time, triple the amount of people that are in this area alone, as well as the transportation, as well as the water use, the hydro use, everything is going to be tripled in this area. Now, what will that do to my home? Will my home now be going at a lower rate because I have a huge apartment building beside me? Will I all of a sudden now be in a depressed area in town because of this apartment building?
So that's an excellent question. So as part of these development applications, there's flow control calculations done on what's available from a street and what additional lines are able to be brought in for, like you said, just water for toilets and showers and sinks. But there's also, sprinkler systems, and there's all sorts of additional stress that new development intensification puts on the community. But as part of development applications, there's significant development charges. And in part, a lot of these development charges go towards effectively funding and paying for infrastructure upgrades, municipal upgrades to support the development. And so again, to answer your specific questions about what would happen to, would this have any effect on your storm, or well, not your storm, your sanitary or water or electricity, we can certainly have our engineers address all that in a response. I would like to say no impact, but it'd be more comfortable having it come from the engineers to say, this is how it's being effectively implemented. With all intensive upgrades, I mean, it's in a variety of municipalities, projects go in through a certain threshold of, here's the demand. The water demand is an excellent question. And there's calculations and engineers effectively determining what can be done within the existing system and what would necessitate the need to do an upgrade. And in some cases, water supply or the capacity for a sewer system, if it's not possible to do the upgrade, the development doesn't go ahead. But if it can fit within the system or within the proposed upgrades, then it does. And so your question is a very valid question, but it's also a question that comes up through this entire process, working with the city engineers, as well as working through the site plan approval process.
Okay, now I have another one that I have to ask. According to your plans, a fire truck cannot get in there if there's a fire. Why
That is
going to be allowed? Because that's not, I mean, your building is going to go quite a ways away from the street entrance. And if there was a fire in one of the back units, just because it has a sprinkler system doesn't mean that some lives are not going to be lost.
Sure, no, I appreciate the question. So what dictates where a fire route needs to be on a site is the Ontario Building Code. And so I hope I don't have any professors watching this, so they'll shake their heads if I miss up the distances. But a fire route for a building, you can classify a building only needing one fire route that can act as the street if from the street to the principal entrance is between 3 and 15 meters. And so this is a way for us to be able to do firefighting with a pumper truck from the street, not require them to enter the site. But I do need to point out, if a vehicle is not able to reach the principal entrance within 15 meters, then we are required to have a fire route on site to make sure that we can reach the portions of the building to be reached. Beyond the sprinkler system, there's also fire hose cabinets in buildings. And so what generally happens is you have a fire department connection at the front of the building. Pumper truck, fire truck, would actually connect between a fire hydrant with the city water, connect into the fire department connection. The pumper truck literally is just that, a pump. And then in heaven forbid, there's a fire in the building. When the fire department is in the building fighting a fire beyond the sprinkler system, they actually bring their own hoses or use hoses in the building, tied at every single floor. Generally speaking, a building like this, you'll have a standpipe with a fire department connection. in both the stair boxes on every single level of the building, so that fire is actually fought from within the building with the fire departments. So there's a lot, I can assure there's a lot of measures put in place going through the site plan and building permit to show just how the development would be compliant to Ontario Building Code requirements in events like that. So it's a long way of me saying right now the proposed development is just one fire route fought from the front of the building. However, if we can't make the 15 meters work because of some setback issues, or there's a land conveyance that's been required doesn't actually go ahead and we can't fit within that 15 meters, and then in that case, we would actually be providing a fire route beside the building to get proper firefighting.
Right. I had one more concern. You changed the designation, where you mentioned today, the designation of the type of tenants you're going to be having in there. According to the parking, the traffic report that you had was based on low income, on the presumption that most of these folks do not have a car. If you're doing market value apartments, all the people you're going to be having in that apartment are now going to have a car. The way you had the report done, you said 35 cars would be leaving or returning home at night and 21 would be leaving during the day. So that all of a sudden changed that amount of traffic that you had said in your report. Can you tell me why?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't speak to why the, certainly there's a clear mistake in the transportation impact study specifying low income. That's certainly not the case. I can see where the confusion came from, because from a technical standpoint, the development does meet the CMHC guidelines as affordable housing, but it is not it is not the guidelines of the City of Brantford for affordable housing or geared income. However, it does, I suppose, instead of thinking of it as a binary, these are either is or isn't, it's more of a range where the range of the tenancy anticipated falls within a certain range where there's not going to be a one parking space per unit requirement in terms of taken for vehicles, but it is not low income. And I understand these terms are relative terms, but I can say just for clarity, the development has been designed to meet the CMHC guidelines for affordable housing. However, affordable housing is not a term we're openly using on the development because we don't want to confuse the issue or conflate it with what the City of Brantford would consider to be affordable housing, which absolutely initiates a completely different assessment. But from a transportation assessment, it may not make a huge difference on their general conclusions, but I can assure you, after receiving these comments and the points that Lawrence has made in terms of some of the errors and omissions in the TIS that's created some confusion, that will be addressed and made sure that we've there's no confusion and their conclusions are either reaffirmed or amended to meet what we're proposing to do.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll let someone else have a turn.
Thank you, Wendy. I don't want it to get lost on one of you asked some great questions, but one of the questions that you raised that Councillor Ntoski and I are very concerned about was the snow that's piled up on West Street by the snow plows. If our city crew and staff are taking copious notes, and I'm sure they'll pass this on the planning after this meeting, that when our plows plow onto the sidewalk, it's our responsibility to clean that. And if it's not cleaned appropriately or quickly, please call Cheryl or I, and we will make sure that's rectified. It's not your responsibility to clean up the snow that we put on our own sidewalks. So thanks for that, Wendy, because I have noticed it, and I've had to go down there myself sometimes to clean it for some of the seniors that are there, but it should be clean for everybody. So,
you have to go 4 times sometimes. Sometimes in the morning.
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah, so just when it happens, if it's not cleaned up within that day, let us know.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Thanks for the question, Wendy. Who else we have next?
Next, we have Janice Goodbrand. Janice, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Go ahead with your question.
My question, I guess I want to start with a quick question about the traffic report. When it references GTA, is that the Greater Toronto Area, or what are they referencing there?
That's specifically what they're referencing, which several people have commented on, and that's
Yeah.
what they're going to be amending to be a community more commiserate with Brantford.
Good, because we're definitely nothing like the GTA, transportation wise, or, you know, walkability or any of those things. I guess my main concern really is this parking and getting in our heads what type of apartments these are going to be. I know we don't want to use geared to income. They're definitely not going to be geared to income. We like to use this affordable terminology, but I don't think they're affordable, or like, I'm not sure what that means to people. I think it means different things to different people. If we're looking at just general market rent, I think that that's probably going to be about $2,000 a month or more. I mean, right now in Brantford, to rent an apartment in an old home in West Street or Colburn Street or up in these areas, you're looking at $1,600. So I think, you know, we're probably looking at $2,000 a month. I really think this parking is going to become an issue. I know from young people I know who have been trying to secure housing, have given up on being able to afford a home, and they're having to rent. And if you have an apartment, particularly if it's a 2-bedroom apartment, you're probably going to share that with someone, or even if it's a 1-bedroom and you're sharing it with a partner, you're probably going to be driving to get to work. So I just am really struggling with this parking piece. I have a personal contact who recently rented an apartment, and, you know, in these old homes, and they're saying there's enough parking in the driveway, but there really isn't. And it becomes an issue with the street parking, as some of these neighbors have indicated, because then they're concerned about, are these people going to overflow into these other side streets? So I don't know. I think you did say that the rent would be included, like everybody is kind of hit for a bit of that cost in the rental. Maybe they have to go with this second level of parking and charge an extra fee for that additional parking if somebody needs the 2 spaces. But I really, really think that this is going to be an issue, particularly where this building is going to be located and the lack of street or empty, you know, retail parking that they could maybe access.
So when it comes to the rental for the market range of units, I can't personally speak to that. I'm certain that from the ownership side, there's been some consideration done to that as part of the overall business plan to have a successful development. And so what I can say is the size of the units are, they're relatively modest. So compared to, larger, maybe that might be 1,200 to 1,300 square feet, just, throwing out some numbers. These units are between 500 and 890 square feet. So by virtue of the size of the units in the suite, it does bring down the cost considerably. And what we've found is our office, we do a lot of multi-unit residential, we do a lot of rental, but we also do a lot of condominium. But what we've been finding is in terms of designing a building that will be successful in a neighborhood where people are, they're happy to have the development because there's a housing crisis, housing shortage, and a house can be an apartment, it can be a mansion, but it ultimately, whoever's living there, it's a house to them. And so we're effectively finding out, okay, construction costs are rising substantially, cost of land is rising substantially. So we're endeavoring to find creative ways to use space as efficiently as possible so that we can ultimately make spaces the right size so they are affordable. And again, I'm just using affordable in terms of a general term, attainable to people of a certain community, because we're not, this is not an investment property for people from Toronto and Vancouver to rent out to students. This is a place where you have people living in a house that are maybe looking to downsize, or a young professional couple that want to rent a place for 5, 6, 7 years until the family grows to a point where they'd like to spread their wings further. So right now, I can't even say that I'm privy to the demographic analysis that was done to determine the size of the residential suites. However, we were given a range of, based off of how much it would cost to build, this would be the ideal range of suites that the folks at CSM, Mark and Steve, feel, because they own properties, they have rental properties, so I think they have a good sense of, here's what people are looking for, here's where there's a higher demand, and so that's what they're trying to meet.
Right. Well, and again, definitely we do need that housing. There's no doubt about that. I just think that maybe, I think it was Ms. Hill commented that maybe it needs to be a little smaller structure and still maintain, that parking level. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
comment. Thank you, Jazz.
Okay, next we have Mr. Terry Duthridge.
Okay,
Can you
Terry, go
hear
ahead.
us, Terry?
I'm here.
Go ahead with your question, please.
Well, most of my questions have been answered. The parking issue, but I think there's a lot of water that they're not taking into account too. So it's been coming down from Burnley Park for years. So that's a lot of the issue that we've got right now.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Terry. I apologize.
All right, you can go.
Well, no, thank you. No, you're absolutely correct. I can assure you, we've been. I'm not gonna say we've got it solved right now. There's a theory, there's a good plan in place that works and can certainly be refined through the next phases of the development. But I can assure you that what you're raising was the very, very first concern brought up by our civil engineers. And so I'm not sure just how much thought Mark and Cameron and Steve put into, hey, this site looks like it's just acting as a river today without doing anything with that, water running between the homes, and is there, flooding issues or leaks in the homes. But what I can say, as soon as our civil engineers, apologies, that's my dog. As soon as our civil engineers started looking at the site, they identify the challenges. And so as part of our process, before a formal application had been made for rezoning, and not official plan, but just a rezone application, this is after the pre-submission, the engineers at the city and the engineers on the consulting side said, oh, there's something wrong here. There's a real problem just in the existing conditions of the site. And so it turns out this is a hill and water is just running down the hill. So they've been able to do a lot of analysis on how to transfer the water table below grade, how to displace it during construction and bathtub design, as well as through substantial engineering upgrades to the site, infrastructure upgrades. They're able to alleviate their concerns to bring the levels, bring the overflow issues within, and I use this terminology specifically, within the municipal guidelines. And so within the city standards of when it's done, as long as it performs the way it's supposed to, and there's securities in place to make sure that's the case, that it works. And so the way I would put it in simple terms, it's taking a bad situation and making it better. The alternative is it is what it is today, which isn't very great. And they believe through a lot of the infrastructural upgrades to the site, above and below grade, they will improve the situation. But Terry, your points that you're raising, they are of significant concern to the point where there was a lot of engineering done on this project before my team, for example, even got very much involved. Normally the architects and planners are leading the charge. Here, the civil engineers were the captains of this process. And they did their whole analysis, and then their conclusion was, yep, there's a way to do it, and it's a way that's financially feasible for the developments, and therefore we continued on with the overall application.
Good, thank you.
Okay, that was our last attendee, unless someone else has any further questions or follow-up questions.
Yeah, Martin's got a second.
Martin, yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Okay, just one more question.
Yes, Martin.
And this might be kind of out there, I don't know. But again, with the idea that from the soil report, the idea that from the soil samples that were taken, that they're indicating this like this quicksand effect, like
Yes.
that idea of, right? Okay, because you haven't taken 100% soil sample, which you're not, right? Okay, so this might be out there, I don't know, but having a building that way, and then when you look at the map that with the elevation of West Street higher, and then these, like my backyard goes lower, would there be anything to the idea of the possibility of a quicksand effect, the water that, the last person was mentioning, this water effect, or the last couple of people, and then the difference in the grade from the higher to the lower, if you compare this proposed building with the apartment building across the street that's on the higher elevation, would there be anything to the idea of creating a sinkhole, that the weight of that building at that lower grade could create a sinkhole for everybody on that island? Because I don't know, when you look at the map, that whole island, everybody's backyard, you've got that higher grade from West Street, then everybody's backyard goes to the lower grade. So would that have anything to do with that? Like
Well, I could certainly have our structural engineers will have something to say about that, but mainly our hydro-G engineers, as well as our geotechnical engineers, they want to make it they felt it's important because there's a few different issues that can be conflated that might confuse, what's the impact here. And so what they're saying is the problem here is water in the soil can effectively undermine the structural stability of the soil. And so if you remove a lot of soil and there's a high water table, that gets that quick effect. And so what they're saying is as you just put a little hole, you sink a well, the temporary dewatering removes that as a possibility. So that excavation with proper shoring, there's still a lot of, even with no water, we can't just dig. We do have to dig either on a 1-to-1 slope or introduce sheet piling or hoarding, depending on how deep you go. And we'd be going fairly deep given the fact that there's a general embankment of the whole site. So the temporary dewatering removes the possibility of any water generated soil integrity and certainly adverse impacts on the neighbor properties. So that's, I think, probably one of the first big points to make. The other point too is the extent of the underground parking, the development, the range of the excavation is pretty small in terms of, it's not like there's other developments, for example, larger developments where we might be going off of the property line, say 0.5 meter or 700 millimeters off the property line to put shoring, and we'll go down 2, 3, 4 stories. So you're effectively taking the entire site block and turn it into underground parking, and then you're building, a nice building on top with landscape. So you would never know just to look at the site. This case here, because we're trying to be very cost effective and efficient in structural costs for the development, the underground parking is effectively contained within the building itself. And so where we'd be putting regular foundations for a house. Now, I'm not calling this a house, but we're not going beyond that. So there's a significant offset between any undermining during the excavation of this development and adjacent lots. So from an intensification perspective, there's lots of room between the side yards and property lines. But that said, we're not just going to say, oh, it's far enough, it's not to have an impact. There's a lot of procedures put in place to have any adverse effects, because it would be the absolute last thing that anybody would want to have impacts to their homes during the construction of this project. I don't want to say namely our clients, but our clients would be the ones footing the bill for any damage to other people. So you can be assured that they're doing everything in their power, and the engineers are as well, because we don't want any adverse effects to anyone's homes here. It's not being a nice neighbor, and they want to be welcome to the community, not ostracized. That's for sure.
Okay, Darlene, have we got to the end of our list there?
Councillor Antosky, we have reached the end of our list. Nobody has their hand up for any follow-ups or any further questions. Sorry?
Okay. No, I was going to say, okay, then we'll, well, we see Joe, so Joe may have something to say. Hi, Joe.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky and Councillor Carpenter. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Joe Muto. I'm the manager of development planning. So I just want to build a little bit upon what Alexandra said at the start of this process, that this is an information session. We're in the infancy of this project or this application at the city. We've circulated their submission, the development submissions. Mark has done a very, very eloquent job of responding to all of the residents this evening. And for those that are even listening on our YouTube channel tonight, I just want to stress that the city's not made a decision on this application just yet. We are going through the process of listening to what some of the concerns are in terms of what's raised tonight, what Alexandra has received in the file via email, via letter, via phone call. We will be looking into that. And most importantly, I've heard a lot tonight, and kudos to all the residents here that have actually read through some of these reports and mentioned some of these statements and concerns, because a lot of that similar commenting will be coming from our professionals at the city. So, for example, our development engineering staff or professional engineering staff that will be looking at the transportation impact study in much more detail and providing very, very full responses to some of the concerns raised tonight and their professional concerns raised with respect to even the matters of stormwater and runoff and all these other matters that we've heard tonight. Those will be exactly the same things that our public works staff will be looking at when they go through this in rigorous detail. So I just want to assure you that whatever comes out of that review, it will also be made available to the public and to Mark and his consulting team and his clients to make sure that they can address these things going forward. So I just wanted to give the public that assurance that we haven't made a decision on this application just yet. I've heard a lot of concerns about the density and what have you on this site. Suffice it to say is that the city now has a new official plan, and this stretch of West Street and other corridors along the city are anticipated to see growth such as this, and it's very understandable that change does affect us all in different ways, and it's hard to grasp that change. But I guess what we're trying to do is manage that change, and that's always the toughest thing. So it's great to hear, like I said, from all the residents this evening, and we will continue to hopefully hear from you as we move through this process. And I just wanted to thank everyone tonight for coming out. When we get engagement of this nature, it's always great from a planning perspective to hear. Thank you.
And thank you, Joe, for making my job so easy. So thank you for covering a lot of the things that I was going to cover so eloquently. I appreciate that very much. Councillor Carpenter and I and Alexandra are always available, because we know once you leave this meeting, you'll go, oh yeah, I wanted to ask, or oh yeah, I thought of something else. So please make sure that you're reaching out to us. All of these comments will be included with any further steps that go on, any reports that come to council. This is all of these comments will be included in the report. And I agree with Joe. There's been some really in-depth engagement here, and I think that Councillor Carpenter and I really want to commend the residents for taking such interest and being really diligent about reading some of these reports that are sometimes just not all that easy to get through. Lots of technical stuff. So with that, this is the very beginning, as Joe said, and it's a good place to start, because as they move forward, starting with the residents' concerns are there, and there are a number of checks and balances going forward. So thank you, everyone, for putting aside some time on an important issue. Thank you, Alexandra, to you and the planning staff, and Councillor Carpenter. Thank you for getting us all started and explaining what this was all about, and to everyone who took time out of their evening. And again, we're always available, and we will do our best to get back to you. One final question, Darlene, I'm assuming everyone gave their email addresses to register for tonight?
That's correct, Councillor Antosky.
So will anybody that registered for tonight be informed of any next steps, anything else that's going on? Perfect. All right. So anyone here can know that you will be informed each step of the way. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Wednesday evening.